Okay, hello
No,
everybody.
I'm not coughing.
Welcome. I'm so sorry it's been a little bit late. It's been a bit hectic behind the scenes here with broadbands bouncing out. We've had coughing fits going on. We've had the whole load. So I do apologise for being a little bit late. But look, we're now back. So thank you and welcome to the third Beecraft Hangout. The principle of this has always been as an aim for Beecraft. To sort of make, to put out as much information as we possibly can to help you in any way that we can in everything that we enjoy doing and we love doing, which is beekeeping. And a little bit of sort of background for you. Beecraft, we're a magazine from the UK, and the reason I say that is because a lot of the people viewing this we know from past experience are coming from, we've had Australians, New Zealanders, Canadians, all over the shop, to be honest. And whereas most of you will probably be watching it through the beecraft.com website or bee-craft.com website, we've actually got comments coming in at the moment from Twitter, from Google+. We've just had one coming in from YouTube, from Theo, so thank you, Theo. So this is a little bit of a sort of a bizarre thing where I'm sort of trying to juggle lots of different things from everywhere else. So, but Beecraft is a UK beekeeper magazine, but we are available in the print, and also we're available on iPads, Androids, you name it, we can get it all there. So if any of you are around the world, hopefully we can help you out. What we're going to talk about today is beekeeping diseases, and one of the joys of Beecraft here and this is that we're a complete range of experiences. I count myself as a complete and utter novice, and I will be for the foreseeable future, knowing me. And then we've got some great beekeepers and authors of beekeeping books and master beekeepers and so on in the panel. So what I'll do is I'll let them introduce themselves, actually. So we've also got Andrew doing his first one here, so I'll leave him till last. Rodri, do you want to just introduce yourself? So Rodri's on the bottom right, and just say who you are and what you're doing. Thanks.
Yeah, my name's Rodri Powell. I'm the Welsh representative of Beecraft, mainly for South Wales. As I've said before, I'm a beekeeper. I've been keeping colonies, around about 7 colonies for about 7 years.
Thanks, Rodri. Wonderful. And Margaret, I think we can hear you okay, can't we?
I hope so. I'm the deputy editor of Beecraft. I've kept bees for about 30 years, and I've got about 8 colonies at the moment.
Wonderful. Thanks, Margaret. And Claire.
Hello, I'm Claire. I'm the editor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine, Claire. Thank
Well, that's all right, because I haven't come up on the screen, so I thought we might have a glitch. But I'm the editor of Beecraft, working with a fantastic team, and I have kept bees for 30 years. Not quite sure how many. At the moment, we have 13, 14, 15 colonies, one of which was a swarm that arrived the other week, and 4 of which are colony splits because they were swarming. But that's where we are at the moment. Okay. Have you lost me?
We've lost James's sound.
Ah dear, sorry. The cardinal sin of trying to type and write an email and everything and trying to keep it silent so it doesn't interrupt the flow, so I do apologise, my fault.
I don't know, I thought men could multitask.
No, we can't. Andrew, do you just want to introduce yourself for us and say hi? Well, I don't know if Andrew can hear us at all, actually, so maybe he's not there. That's fine. Okay, not to worry. So anyway, let's talk about a couple of things. We've had this coming in from Twitter, which I think I quite enjoy, which is it seems that every time we do this, there seems to be a Twitter chat going on at the same time, which is AgriChat UK. So we're in competition with everybody. So there we go. Right. Let me just bring that back out of there again and turn it off. There we go. So beekeeping diseases, and what I thought we would do is we kick off with what are known as the brood diseases, and obviously there's also quite a lot of those coming around. And what I'm going to try and do is try to go through them. Obviously, we've got the likes of European foulbrood, American foulbrood, which is obviously notifiable. We're going to explain that, hopefully. And then talk about other ones like Sacbrood, Chalkbrood, there's the other Chalkbrood as well. And try and bring in a whole host of different diseases for people to have a look at. And what I thought we would just kick off with is probably the one which is most feared. And there are not that many cases, fortunately, each year. But I'm just going to share a photo. And Claire, perhaps could you head us off and just sort of talk a little bit about American foulbrood, which we will see here, and just let us know what people need to look out for.
I'll try my best. I'm better if I've got a set of photos in front of me, but I haven't at the moment. But American foulbrood is caused by a bacillus, tiny bacillus larvae, and it kills the larva after the cell has been sealed. And as you can see in the photo, it turns the larva into a sort of gooey, brown, sludgy yuck. And one of the field tests for AFB, American foulbrood, is to get a matchstick or something similar, stick it into what you think is an affected cell, wiggle it round, and then withdraw it slowly. You know, not minutely slowly, but you don't whip it out. And if it is foulbrood, it'll come out in that long, snotty string that you can see in the photograph. Another sign of AFB is sunken cappings. They go all sort of, again, sort of waxy and pretty horrible looking. But they're sunken.
Claire, just like this in.
Thank you. That helps me to see. I can't indicate on it, but you can see there's cells where the cappings are sunken, and they can sometimes they'll be perforated as well. So that's AFB. It's pretty nasty. The spores can live for many years in equipment. If the colony dies out, the sludge, the larval sludge, if you like, dries into a scale. And when you're looking, if you're going to buy new old equipment, second-hand equipment, the best thing to do is to have a look into the cells and see if you can see the scale. It'll be lying on the bottom of the cell. So if you tip the comb sort of at 45 degrees away from you, so you're looking down into the cells and get the light shining into the cells, then you'll be able to see scales. I mean, my recommendation would be not to buy a second-hand comb unless bees are on it. And if bees are on it, get it inspected or inspect it yourself to make sure that it's free of disease before you actually buy it. But don't buy old second-hand comb that's been sitting around. But that's just my
there's a help on screen at the moment. I don't know if you can see that. This is the website at beesource.com, which has got a pretty good sort of overview.
Yes, so you can see there. I mean, if the larva, it's on its back when it dies, so its head sticks up. So that's what you see when you have the scale. When it's dried up, you can sometimes see the tongue sticking up. But AFB is notifiable in the UK, which means that if you even suspect that you might have it, you need to call in the bee inspector from the National Bee Unit up in York. They will come out, they will look at it, and they will inspect it. And if they confirm, if they can do a test on something like a pregnancy test, you know, you mix it up and you drop a drop in, and then if you see how many lines appear, and they can do that test in the field as well. So if they confirm that it is AFB, then that colony will be destroyed, and there will be a standstill order placed on all colonies within an area of, help me out, somebody 5 kilometres, I think. So they will notify other beekeepers in your area, and there will be a standstill order, which means that you cannot take bees out, or you can't, well, you can bring them in if you want to, but you can't take them out again until it is deemed to be clear. So I hope I've got that right, because that's from memory.
No, that sounds good. I'm just going to share this as well, just as sort of a summary in terms of AFB, and this is taken directly actually from that website, BeeBase, which we'll come on to a little bit later. So just to sort of summarise a little bit the symptoms of AFB, so uneven or pepper pot brood pattern, which I think we covered, sunken, greasy or perforated darkened cell cappings, which you could certainly see on that image where the matchstick was coming out, which was this next bit, which is the roping, sticky larval remains, which is tantamount again from beesource.com, very good resource there in terms of how that happens, and the dark scales which are difficult to remove from cells. So, I mean, is there anything else there which you think sort of the tricks of the trade, which
I think on the scales thing, you see EFB can also go into scales, but they can be removed. So I think it is the fact that you can't get the AFB scales out. They do stick to the bottom of the cells. There are some bees, of course, that will chew them out and will destroy the cell and throw the scales out, but the spores will still be around. So even if you've got bees that do that, I would still recommend getting rid of them.
Okay, thanks, Claire. That's great. Has anybody else got any? Rodri, you've got something there. What have you got there?
It's an example of a lateral flow device, which Claire mentioned, used for identifying AFB and EFB.
Thank you. I couldn't remember what it was called.
It's an example of the contents there.
Just can you hold it still?
Yeah.
It can focus. Bit further back towards you, I think. No, the other way.
It's a tricky one. Hang on, let me just blue box you so you can actually see it. There you go. There you go.
That's better.
And I mean, have you been unfortunate enough to use these, Rodri, or not?
Luckily, no. I purchased them as a precaution, so if I do find an example of a suspected infection, I can test myself, in addition to notifying the bee disease inspector as well. So I keep them as a precaution.
Because they do them for EFB and AFB.
EFB and AFB.
Yeah.
I have to say, I've never had to use them. How do you use them? Is there a stick in there, or how does it work?
Does it come with the liquid? Is the liquid in that bottle?
Yeah, that's basically you take a sample of the suspected material, you insert it into the little pot with the liquid in, shake it for 2 minutes. You then use the eyedropper that's provided to drop it onto the center of the lateral flow device. It's then quite similar to a pregnancy testing kit. You get 2 lines.
I just lost you there for a second, but
if you can hear me, the first line indicates that the thing is working, and then the second line, if it's there, indicates AFB, and if it doesn't, it indicates it's clear. But the first line it just tells you that the actual device is working.
Yep.
Have you said what is done to a colony if the disease is confirmed then?
Yeah, it's a good
Not
point.
yet.
It's a question coming actually.
Not yet. Sorry.
No, actually this is New Zealand. Hi, Gary. And Gary was meant to join us, and sadly, I think he's actually at work in New Zealand because obviously we're completely the opposite side of the planet. So he couldn't talk, but he can listen. So, do you have to burn your hives if you have AFB?
Yes. Yes, the bee diseases. The bee inspector will come around and you dig a pit, you bury the combs in there. You have to burn the combs and the frames. You can scorch the boxes, and I think you scorch the excluders unless they're plastic. But you can get away with scorching the woodwork, but you do burn the bees. You kill the bees first with a half pint of petrol or something, and then the frames, the combs, they go into the pit, they're burnt, and then they're buried, because you don't want the bees, robber bees, coming along, finding it and taking it, saying whoopee, and taking it home.
You don't drown the bees in petrol. You put in a small amount in the feed hole, having blocked up the entrance, and allow the heat of the colony to vaporize the petrol and kill the bees that way. Yeah,
it's about half a pint, isn't it, Andrew?
Yes.
It's not
and invariably, when I've had AFB, it's been very dry and the ground's extremely hard, and it's a devil of a job to dig a hole. Ha ha ha! Yeah, very funny. And I've even had a bee inspector stand watching me trying to dig a hole, but generally they help.
Yeah, but they don't have to, though, do they?
No, I know.
It's not part of the job.
About you having such a struggle to dig a hole, and they want it a certain depth.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not nice, is it? It's not a nice thing. I had a chat with a beekeeper last year who just said that watching his entire colony having to do that was not nice, and the proverbial digging their grave must be even worse, I would think.
And in the UK, of course, we've got bee disease insurance, and you can get a certain amount towards the equipment that you've burnt, but it's not 100% refund, but it's a good contribution towards it.
I think one of the things that is worth saying is that getting AFB is not your fault. I mean, okay, apiary hygiene and all that, but in many senses, there's not a lot you can do to stop your bees picking up AFB if they're going to pick it up.
Fortunately, it's not too prevalent at the moment in the UK. It's more the EFB that is.
I think that's because we burn it.
Well, yeah, that's right.
Keep it under control.
Controls that have been in since whatever it is, 1947.
Yeah.
That now the occurrence of AFB is relatively low in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, just bringing up this comment here from Dan through Twitter, just saying that the MBU investigated a suspected outbreak last year in Norwich. So it's certainly around, but hopefully not too prevalent.
Yeah, it's not. But if you look at the ministry at DEFRA statistics, you'll find that it's not. It's relatively low.
I think it's about 1% is the figure that comes to my mind.
All right, there's outbreaks in certain parts of the country. I don't say it doesn't occur, but it's relatively low compared to what it used to be.
It's an interesting one because I don't know if you can burn them, but Dan's also then asked, how would you destroy a polyhive?
Well, you've got to burn the whole lot.
It must burn, mustn't it? I've never really thought about it.
I'm not sure. I think people have asked the NBU about how to disinfect a polyhive. And there may be agricultural disinfectants that would be effective, but you'd have to check that with the NBU or somebody else. I have a feeling that there are ways of disinfecting a polyhive, but don't quote me. I mean, ask the NBU.
Well, if there's anybody out there who is using a polyhive and does know the answer to that, please just send us a tweet or put it on or send it in as a question. That'd be nice. Chris has actually mentioned there's a great PDF on foulbrood on the Varroa BeeBase here, and it doesn't actually put the entire link. Sorry about that, but I'll make sure that's out there at the end. I'm going to reference that as well. What I was just going to mention is we've covered American foulbrood. Then obviously there's the European foulbrood side, and I wonder if either actually, in fact, just before I say that, Obi on Twitter will come on to your points about any particular diseases or hive materials more resistant in a second once we've covered European foulbrood. But maybe Margaret or sort of Claire, I wonder if you wouldn't mind just covering the European side. I'm going to bring up this again from BeeSource because I think it's a really good sort of demonstration of what it's all about. But yeah, could you cover European foulbrood for us?
Go on, Margaret, your turn. You're not getting away with it.
I'm very lucky. I haven't had any of these diseases. I've never experienced them except in textbooks. So really, if people recognised healthy brood, that's going most of the way to the problem. So what I would say is look for healthy brood every time you inspect. So you want to have cappings which are coffee-coloured and dry and flat. And you want to look for an unsealed brood which is white and comfortable looking and segmented. One of my mentors called them curly pearlies. I love that phrase because it makes you think, right, are my larvae healthy? And if they're not curly, if they're sort of uncomfortable looking, or if they're off colour, so if they're not pearly white, if they're yellow or green or brown or grey, or if the cappings don't look right, if they're not nice and dry and biscuity looking, but if they're sunken or greasy or holy all of those things are things that might alert you to either of the foul broods. So that's the point at which you get onto BeeBase and you get their PDF, you download it and have a little look at all the photos. BeeCraft has apiary guides too, and they've got lots and lots of photos that you can compare your brood that you're worried about with the photos. And then, if you have any worries at all, you can request an inspector to come and look at your bees if you're registered with BeeBase. So it's very worthwhile to register with BeeBase, and you can always request a visit if you're at all worried.
Absolutely, and just in front of you here, actually, this is just an example of a picture of EFB.
I think the thing to notice really is that EFB affects the larvae before the cell is sealed. So you will see larvae lying, as Margaret says, uncomfortable in the cell, as though they've got a stomach ache, and they're squiggling around trying to get comfortable. And then they go into this sort of melted look, which you can see in the photograph, lying in all sorts of different positions in the cell, certainly not curled up in the middle and the bottom. And again, if you stick a matchstick in and you wiggle it round, it will rope to, but far less than AFB will. The rope will break very, very soon after you start to pull it out of the cell.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's this one here. When you're talking about how, it's not. What did you call it again, Margaret? A pearly curly, was that?
Pearly curlies are the healthy larvae, and if every time you inspect, you say to yourself, right, have I got curly pearlies? Look in the unsealed brood and see if they're white and comfortable looking, and segmented and plump. And that will reassure you. But any deviation from that needs, looking at.
Absolutely. Certainly, sort of in B and C here, they don't look particularly comfortable.
Well, that's right. They're not lying curled up in the bottom of the cell. Well, B is not too bad, but you've taken it away. I can't see it now. So.
Hang on. There we are. See that one there. There you
go. Go up to A. Can you?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. A looks healthy. But then you start seeing, it going, the segments disappearing, and then gradually it sort of goes into the melted state that you could see in the photograph.
And I'll tell you what, Margaret, you mentioned earlier, let me just get rid of this one. Sorry, I'm onto my desktop now, which is not the best way of doing it. But you mentioned about recognising what healthy brood looks like, but also smells like. And again, one of the things that I remember so distinctly in a bee disease workshop I went into was they brought in the frames in, it was literally quarantined conditions. And one of the main things that they pointed out was the smell, and the smell of the frames it was not a pleasant smell at all. The odour was awful, and I've never smelled anything quite like it. And really, I suppose from a beginner's perspective, which ultimately I am, it's that importance, and I've read it in books before, which is the importance of picking out a frame of bees which is fresh and healthy and looks good, and looking at it and understanding how it looks. And it literally says smell it, and really it means it by smell it, because it's so distinguishable when you've got an EFB or an AFB. That smell is so powerful. So I just wanted to make that point myself, actually. Excuse me for sticking in.
Well, you can join in.
I think a good tip to remember as well is if you're looking for these brood diseases, it's good to ensure that you shake all the bees off the frames, because that way you can examine every cell and you can look for the pearly curlies, describe them.
Excuse me a minute, I've just got to go somewhere.
No problem. But, funny enough, there's so again, Gary makes a great point about AFB, and I think it's just bad luck. I think it was Claire who made it earlier on. The key is this bit, isn't it? It's stopping it spreading to your neighbours. So I think that's a very, very valid point. Now, Chris here makes an interesting point. Easy way, here we are, I'll just bring it up here. So easy way to remember, AFB is seen after capping, EFB is seen earlier, before the brood is capped, which that's quite a nice way of remembering, actually, isn't it? Thanks, Chris. That's great. Really appreciate that. I'll just come out of that. And then I'm going to bring in this question, and Andrew, maybe you're the best person to ask this, which is coming from Obi. Are there any types of hive material that is more resistant to foul brood than others, i.e. plastic frames versus wooden or anything like that? Do you know anything about that?
No, there isn't. Sorry, there's not much you can say about that.
That's pretty straightforward then. There we go. That's pretty easy. Okay. I'm just going to go into, there's a couple of questions here earlier on about some of that, but no, nothing's come in. So by the way, if again, if you're watching it through the Beecroft website, just above the video, there's a little section where you can ask questions, and they will come through as emails to me, and I can certainly bring them in. So if you've got anything, just let me know. Just going on to another brood now. So why don't we focus on? Let's go on to Chalkbrood, because that's something which I've often found when I was in my first year. I found Chalkbrood very disconcerting because I couldn't quite explain it. And what I'm just going to try and do is bring up a picture of Chalkbrood. I think this is quite a nice picture, actually, this one. So bear with me 1 second, and then perhaps we can just talk through. There we go. So that's Chalkbrood in there, very small Chalkbrood. So can someone just tell me, sort of what Chalkbrood, what is it? What causes it, and is it anything to be aware of? Go on, Claire. You went away. You deserted us.
Sorry, I had to put the geese in. Into their night shed. Chalkbrood is caused by a fungus, Aspergillus apis, I think. But that's this is all coming off the top of my head. And basically, it infects the larva, and it turns it white first, and then as it forms spores, it goes grey, and it goes into a hard lump. So they're called Chalkbrood mummies because they're hard. Mostly the bees can hoik them out themselves, and you'll find them scattered around on the floor, or even outside the entrance. I'll even throw them outside. It's in one sense, it's something a colony can live with, but obviously a bad infection, if you think about it, all those mummies are worker bees that haven't actually made it. So it's reducing, it's weakening your colony. I mean, the odd few cells is not going to be too bad, but if you get a bad infection, then you really do need to do something about it. You can put them onto clean comb. That'll help because it'll take the fungus spores away. And also requeening is something that can help, because some queens, they seem to produce workers that are more susceptible to Chalkbrood than others. But that's about all you can do, I think, as far as I know, unless anybody's got any more ideas.
No, I have to say that was one of the things that I was always told, which is, I mean, Chalkbrood generally, it clears up on its own accord. That's one of the ones that I was told of. So,
well, it may clear up, but as I say, I think what you want to do is get a picture of get your frame. If you've got a Chalkbrood, then if you can, get your frame, get all the bees off, take it away somewhere, and actually count how many Chalkbrood mummies you've got in it. And I think you'll be quite surprised at the number of non-bees that are coming through because they've died. In other words, the bees that you've lost from your colony. So even a few mummies, actually, if you start thinking about each side of 7-8 frames of brood, it can come up to a reasonable total, particularly if you've got a bad infection.
Yeah, and they gather on the floorboard or the Varroa screen as well, because the bees sometimes take them out of their cells.
Yeah, we've had them there, and we've even had them throwing them out of the entrance.
And that's probably one of the easiest ways to spot it as well, when you see the bees doing that as well, isn't it? Getting rid of it all and tidying it all up. So.
Well, you can see it when you look at a comb. I mean, it's fairly obvious.
Absolutely. And as you said, it's a fungal disease, so that's Any other points? Now, just looking, actually moving on to another. I mean, that's one is relatively harmless compared to. I mean, we've gone literally from the tips of the mountains of American and European foulbrood just down to Chalkbrood, but bringing in another one of the brood diseases, which this time is a viral disease. And I'm just going to share this and just see if any of you guys can identify it. Because here we go. Let's just bring that one up there. Can you guys see that?
It's upside down.
Oh, is it?
If it's what I think it is, it's upside down.
What do you reckon? What do you think?
Sacbrood.
There you go. That's it.
Because that larva, if you think about it, should be lying on the base of its cell, which is why I'm saying it's upside down.
Oh man! There you go.
That's
there
better.
You go.
That's better. Yeah, that will do.
Oh dear, I won't do that one again. But okay, so Sacbrood, viral disease, isn't it?
You know, I don't know off the top of my head. Anybody else know what causes Sacbrood? Rodri, you ought to know this.
No, come on, Rodri, you just had your module 3.
It is a virus. I can't remember the scientific name, but
oh no. Yeah.
But so Sacbrood is. I mean, if I just bring up another photo here, bear with me. I'll because actually it's a bit difficult when you see them in the cell, isn't it? So if you, because the way that I've always seen this is actually when you pull them out of the cell, you generally pull them out with tweezers, or that's when I've seen this.
Do you know when it kills it then?
No,
when does the virus kill the larva?
Go on, enlighten me.
If you think about it. You think about it, that's in its larval skin, so it kills it before the last molt. So it wants to molt into an adult, and it kills it, and it's still in its larval skin, which is why you can pull it out in a little sac, which is why, presumably, it's called Sacbrood.
There you go, all Sacbrood. And again, I mean, I think this is another one which isn't necessarily, is it hugely, so is there a lot to be concerned about?
I think I've seen it twice in 30 years.
Yeah, it's not very common. Not very common.
But what can happen is that when it dies, you saw in that first picture that the head is upright at the front of the cell. So if the bees uncap it, you'll see this thing sticking up, and when it dries, it begins to look like what they call a Chinese slipper. You know, the upturned toe on Persian slippers. So that's something else that will be referred to as you know, if it looks like a Chinese slipper.
Okay. Actually, I just want to go back. I've had a couple of questions in from the website. One from Nicholas, and actually, Nicholas, I've got a couple of your questions from a couple of days ago you submitted for later. But this is just specifically with Chalkbrood. Does increased ventilation achieve any benefit with Chalkbrood? Anybody know any answer on that one?
No, I don't know, but logic says that, you know, if the colony is very damp inside, then that's usually conducive to fungal growth. So it could do. I don't know.
I have to say, I think I seem to remember that coming through in the workshop that I did on it, which was that's what they recommended is ventilation. So
right.
I remember something that if the brood temperature drops below a certain level, that sort of kickstarts the spore germination.
Could be,
Chalkbrood,
yeah.
But,
so don't ventilate then. We could have a big discussion about ventilated floors or not.
Well, yeah, that's for another day, isn't it? It's
exactly
difficult. I mean, everybody has a different opinion. That's the joy of these beekeepers. And I have to say, that's probably one of the glory, I think, as well as of having experienced a novice on here, because there's so many different practice which is taught through in all the sort of the teaching lessons that we now go to. I'm just going to bring in a question from, I think it was from Amanda. Yeah, Amanda Lirley. So thanks, Amanda, for asking this one. Just going back a step to the world of AFB. And this is quite an interesting question, actually. I'm not sure how to answer this one. So what happens if you have AFB in a hive on land that isn't yours, like someone else's garden? Do you need to get their permission in advance in case of digging a big hole? I would think you absolutely have.
Well, yes. I mean, if somebody had hives up my garden and they got AFB and they just walked in and started digging a hole, I'd be most upset. They'd also find it incredibly difficult, but that's beside the point.
No.
Our house is not called Stonycroft for nothing.
It's normal courtesy to at least ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to be honest, I think because it's notifiable with AFB anyway, it's going to be pretty obvious if you've got bee inspectors coming around to have a look at it and all that sort of stuff, because obviously that's the first thing you want to do, isn't it? Because the advice with any sort of AFB or EFB is the first thing to do is try and minimise the entrance to try and stop other bees getting in and stealing, because obviously that could cause a spread. And then secondly, get a call into a bee inspector, your local bee inspector, as soon as possible to come around. And again, we come back onto this whole BeeBase thing, which is if you're registered with BeeBase, it's far easier for them to notify everybody else. So that's one of those things.
But I do believe that in fact the bee inspector must have your permission before they can come onto your land and presumably onto your friend's land if that's where you've got your hives. But if you refuse, they can actually get the police involved, and the police can, force an entry, so to speak, or insist on an entry.
Well, there you go.
Unless they've changed the law since I looked at that, which is a long time ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, so I think it comes back to what you said, Andrew, about common courtesy, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
it's always it's always polite to do it. I mean, it makes sense if you've got a concern about it. I mean, they need to know as well. I'm just going to bring in a question from Lucy, and I'll just bring it in here. I think I've got Chalkbrood. It's a weak colony with a very new queen. Other than removing the frames, what I suspect is a mummified cat brood. What do you recommend? Any comments on that?
Well, first of all, check whether it is Chalkbrood or not, because if it's EFB, then it's a totally different ball game. I don't know. I mean, the standard recommendation for Chalkbrood is to requeen. I don't know. Is there any other recommendation anybody else has got?
Transfer on to clean comb as well.
Yeah, true. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I've just
already said that.
Yeah, I've only said it. There's no. It's actually written in here. Some of the books I'm looking at the moment. There's no satisfactory cure as such. So.
No. No, there isn't.
A weak colony is more likely to get it. So if she thinks it's a weak colony, are there some ways she can boost it? Perhaps she's got another colony that could spare a frame of sealed brood, shake all the adults off and pop it in. And then the sealed brood will not need feeding. It'll hatch soon, and that will help to strengthen the colony. And it might even get past the Chalkbrood that way.
Yeah,
strengthen a colony or unite it to another one.
Absolutely.
But that's the same thing. It's just doing it a different way. That's for beekeeping. You can do things so many different ways. It's unbelievable.
Well, I tell you I think that's probably quite an apt time to bring in something which I mentioned Nicholas earlier on, who's just put a question in through our website. He actually put something through the other day, which I think is really important for people who are not necessarily used to beekeeping. And all these sort of brood diseases are quite scary and frightening. And I have to say, until I went on a bee disease course, for me it was quite unnerving that every second you'd be looking at a frame of brood and worrying if you had EFB and worrying if that wasn't right or this wasn't right. And it took me a long time to sort of get some understanding of what that I didn't have to be.
James, that's why it's so important that you know what normal brood looks like, and it's often something that gets forgotten. It is very important that a beginner is taught what normal brood should look like, and then you can be more certain about whether you've got AFB or EFB or some of the other brood diseases you've been talking about.
Absolutely, and I tell you what, that leads on to what Nicholas had actually put, which is there are so many diseases and other issues to record in the beehive. I was told by a wise beekeeper not to get too uptight in learning all the details. His advice was learn what's normal, and if you see something that's not normal, then investigate and deal with it. And I think he makes a point, which is it is perfect sense for a beginner.
That's exactly right.
So
I would agree with that, absolutely. But I would say also go on to learn about these brood diseases, because when we were talking before we came on air, you know, there's only about a dozen that you've got to learn and find out about. It's not like, you know, your cat or your dog that can be struck down by goodness knows how many hundreds of diseases. You know, you're only talking about 10 or 12 diseases, and they're not difficult to actually learn about. The symptoms are fairly obvious for Chalkbrood, AFB, EFB. I mean, when you're talking about acrin and nosema and things like that, it's a different matter because you have to go to the microscope to see those. But certainly the brood diseases, in fact, there's only probably what we mentioned, 4, the AFB, EFB, Chalkbrood, Sacbrood. Bald brood is probably caused by wax moth, so it's not really a disease.
Chalkbrood.
Chalkbrood, well, yeah, that just goes black.
Well,
Talking about 5, you know.
Well, should we just mention that Chalkbrood for a second? Can we just sort of emphasise that? Because in theory, I suppose it's not necessarily a disease, is it? Am I wrong to state that?
Well, it's a condition more than a disease.
So yeah. So, but okay. So if somebody is concerned, I mean, what is Chalkbrood, and what do they need to look out for, and why does it happen?
Well, it can happen when you've had a lovely warm day and the brood nest has expanded and all the bees are looking after it, and then suddenly you get a cold snap. So the bees tuck into a loose cluster, but some of the brood might be left outside, in which case it'll get chilled, and when something gets really cold, it dies. And when it dies and putrefies, it goes black.
There you go. Pretty nice and simple. No, but that's it, though, isn't it? I mean, that's that's the 5th of the brood diseases per se.
Yeah.
You know, so
but, I mean, that is probably, I don't know. Have you ever seen Chalkbrood? Anybody else? Because I haven't.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Have you?
Yeah.
Was it because of that, or had it been left out the hive, or what? Or was it because of, you know, temperature fluctuations?
Yeah, it was what you've just been describing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think leaving a comb outside a colony while you're inspecting it is going to get it cold enough to chill it.
No. It's what you've described, the change in the weather.
So again, sorry, Margaret. Go.
Sorry, it can also be caused if the adults aren't numerous enough to keep the brood warm for some reason.
Yeah.
So, for example, a pesticide killing a lot of the adults. So the brood is there, but not being kept warm like it should be.
Yeah, basically there aren't enough bees either in the hive completely, as Margaret's just said, or the cluster has just gone too small to cover the brood on the outside. But I honestly don't think it's terribly common.
I suppose that's a benefit of using something like a polystyrene hive, because you need fewer bees to maintain that constant brood temperature compared to, you know, a standard wooden one.
Yeah, possibly. I've never used a poly hive, so I couldn't. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's get a real debate going. So we've crossed off ventilation, whether we need more or less, and now let's go into the poly hives versus wooden hives.
No, not tonight. The other brood disease that you haven't mentioned is stone brood. And as far as I know, the NBU have only got one photograph of stone brood. So again, I don't think we need. It's very similar to Chalkbrood, but it's just caused by something different. I mean, you get the solid mummies, but I honestly don't think, you know, anybody's going to find a lot of that in their hive. Be very surprised.
Oh, let's see. You've set a red rag to a bull here, with the NBU only having one photo. Let's see. Have I?
Oh, maybe they've got more now. No, they only had one when I last dealt with it.
I don't know who's more powerful. Is it Google or is it the NBU? That's what I'm worried about.
That's Chalkbrood.
That's Chalk. Oh dear. Right, there we are. Let's have a look.
That looks like one of my photos.
Yeah. Heaven forbid. That's what we don't want. Let's have a look at any of those. So that is probably there. That looks like Chalkbrood.
It says it's Chalkbrood.
I don't know what everyone else thinks, but I think in the UK we're quite lucky to have the MBU and the bee disease inspector. I'm not sure how it differs between countries, but from my experience, I've had nothing but good things to say about them. You know, they're always there if you need support and help. So
I think you're right. I think we're fantastically lucky, because even in Ireland and, well, Scotland now is sort of served by the NBU, and Scotland and Wales, but in Southern Ireland they don't have anything like this. And as far as I know, I mean, they have extension workers in the states. I know the individual states have agricultural extension workers, beekeepers, but they don't. To my knowledge, I mean, okay, the states have got many more research labs, but not quite on the same scale as the NBU. And I know the NBU is looked up to from all around the world, so it's really first class.
Well, I tell you what, to the people who are watching from overseas, because there are quite a few of them as we've seen, the NBU is the National Bee Unit, isn't it?
Yes.
For those of you, it seems like there's a sort of a plethora of names, but I mean, for those of you who are not familiar with the NBU side, but you're probably familiar with BeeBase, which is, if I understand it, it's the website, isn't it, of the NBU. So if you just go into search engines and type in the NBU or BeeBase, you will get it. And what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to...
It is a government organisation.
And these are the guys who you have to report any cases of the EFB and the AFB to, is that correct?
Yes. You might have to search for National Bee Unit rather than NBU. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the initials come up.
No, I didn't check that, I have to say. But let me just say it. So this is the BeeBase website.
That's BeeBase, yeah.
And basically, just for everybody who is watching, I presume anybody outside of the UK can log into this as well. They can't sign up, I don't think, but they can actually have a look at all the helpful pages and the resources they've got here.
Yeah, I mean, you've got all sorts of things down the left-hand side.
Exactly, and obviously they've got their image gallery in here. And if you go into the
see if they've got any stone brood, James.
Okay, there we go. Let's see if they've got their one, shall we? Yeah, shall I just type it in there, shall I? So, Sacbrood, German. There we go, let's have a look. No, 0 images. That's
right.
That's a good start, isn't it?
Well, I can let them have that image back.
Oh, look, see, look, I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's evidently a big old hole being filled and burned. So some sorry beekeepers had that. But the reason I just wanted to sort of show this for people is, if anybody go to the National Bee Unit website, which is actually, if you look up here, it's part of DEFRA, so it's all there. What is particularly interesting is on the bee pests, diseases, and maps page. You've basically got on this left-hand side all of the various diseases, and today we've only really focused on foulbrood because it is such a big topic. But obviously there's other things which we may cover in another one, like Varroa, small hive beetle, which in other countries we're obviously affected by differently, but they're still a threat for all of us. But it's all in here, and it actually, what I think is quite interesting, you can go back in time in terms of disease incidents, where, when, how. And that's a particularly interesting page for people to have a look at if you are concerned or looking, you want to see trends of AFB and EFB and things like that. So it is definitely well worth a look. And if I'm correct, we should be advising all of the beekeepers out there to sign up, because you get this option to log in, don't you? So maybe could one of you just take over in terms of why that's a good thing, what we should be doing as responsible beekeepers?
Well, if you're registered with BeeBase, then the National Bee Unit knows about you, and therefore, if there's an outbreak of AFB or EFB within a 5 kilometre radius of your apiary, they can tell you, and they can come around, they can inspect it, and they can warn you, and they can also give you information about, Tropicolaps, small hive beetle, anything nasty that starts arriving in the country. Vespa velutina, and things like this. So you get a lot of information from them, and they are there to help.
Absolutely. I think there's a quite interesting point made by Dan, who's come in from the website. I haven't got time to put it into a slideshow, but basically said the NBU must have inspectors who remain impartial due to the powers they have of destroying hives. I mean, I think that's a really valid point Dan, thanks for that. And he said he was looking forward to the poly versus wood debate.
Well, I've never known a colony that swarms into a cavity with a ventilated floor, but there we are.
Oh, that's a separate debate. That's the next.
Yeah, absolutely.
What we should do is we should just have a complete hangout based on contentious issues and bring lots of opinionated beekeepers and basically let everybody loose on the same hangout and just say, right, let's go. That could be the next one in a couple of months' time. But we haven't got time to go into all the various other things, but Philip O'Brien, who's been looking through YouTube, he actually sent this in very, very early, and I do just want to help him out just for a sort of a final question to be brought in. It's just regarding Varroa, actually, but it's to do with a piece of well, the max strips, which we heard a lot about at the convention. So I've noticed several of my bees have deformed wings. I've heard mixed thoughts about the uses of max strips to treat Varroa, regular dust with icing sugar, and periodically use Varroa guide. Any thoughts on that? Because I have to say, I've only ever done the icing sugar tests myself. Any thoughts?
I would think his colony is quite near extinction. If you have quite a lot of bees with deformed wing virus, it's very often a result of high Varroa levels. So I think he'd be advised to get something that works on there pretty soon. As soon as possible.
Yeah, we used max strips last autumn, and we've heard all sorts of things about queens dying and all the rest of it, but ours seem to come through without any problems whatsoever. And you can, it's not something that you've got to take off within 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever the period is. You can actually just leave it in the hive. And a lot of them, they hadn't actually taken all the stuff down. But we did prop the entrances slightly because we were told that they needed a bit more ventilation, and but in fact the next day we went and put them back because of the wasps. So we just put down the entrance and everything seemed to be fine. So that's our experience for what it's worth, but it's only one experience.
There we go. Okay, and just one final question. This is a very, very generic one to finish. So Obi has asked, are there any particular diseases that have reared its ugly head this year over any others? Have you heard of anything which is kicking around? I mean, there's obviously been, well, it's not really a disease, but I mean, the hornet has been obviously in the news quite a bit recently.
Yeah, it's not here yet, though.
No.
Thank goodness.
I think it seems as if the media are very keen to get this hornet over here because it's creating huge press.
I think the NBU, the National Bee Unit, are very keen for people to actually know that it's a threat and know what it looks like so that they can report it as soon as it does turn up. I think that's where it's coming from.
EFB's been quite prevalent in the last couple of years or so, hasn't it? Whereas AFB isn't as high, EFB has built up a number of outbreaks.
Out of interest, I received an email about 2 weeks ago to notify me that there was an outbreak of EFB within 3 kilometers of one of my apiaries. So I think it is on the increase. Something to look out for. So.
Yeah, I've got that as well, that EFB is rising steadily. I don't know, I haven't got the statistics. You'd have to go to BeeBase. I'm sure they're on there somewhere to tell you how many infected colonies they've found. But that's certainly the word on the street, if you like.
Okay, final question with regard to the bee diseases. This came in from Ian, actually. Came in yesterday. And this is not a generic book recommendation, but are there any particular books talking about just purely diseases that we can recommend? Do you know of any?
Well, Beecraft has just printed one by Pam Gregory, who was the regional bee inspector for the whole of Wales. Healthy bees are happy bees. It's been off the shelves for a bit, but it's about to come back into circulation again and will be available on the Beecraft website. There's also, as Margaret mentioned earlier, the Beecraft apiary guides, which are they're summaries, but they're the sort of thing that we designed them so that you could take them out into the apiary, and if you looked at your bees and you thought, well, that doesn't look quite right, but I can't remember what AFB, EFB, Chalkbrood, etc. looks like, you could flick through and compare with, as Margaret said, with the photos that are there. The Welsh beekeepers have produced a similar sort of thing. I don't know, and I think Ibra has as well.
They were produced in conjunction with Ibra.
Yes, that's right, yes. So that's sort of handy cards that you can take to the apiary. But the book is Healthy Bees Are Happy Bees, or Happy Bees Are Healthy Bees. I can't remember which way around it is.
Healthy bees are happy bees.
Thank you, Andrew.
By Anne Gregory. So for those of you...
But that is very comprehensive. She has covered just about everything that you could possibly think of.
There is a lot of detail, and I think this person who was asking was a beginner, wasn't it?
True, but
so
if you want a disease book,
guide might be the easier thing to start with.
Yeah, but if you really want to learn about the disease,
I agree.
That's the book to go for. Yeah.
And is that back up on the site at the moment?
It will be. It will be shortly.
Okay, so those of you who are again watching on the site, actually, if you go to the, I think it's the right-hand side of the video, it goes into our shop area, and there's some books, and the apiary guides that we've mentioned are in there. Actually, I meant to mention this earlier with regards to the AFB point, because Wendy, who's our marketing manager, had a problem. I think she said it was a few years ago now, and she'd had an issue with the and here it is as a quote unquote. She had an awful issue with the smell in her hive, so she called the bee inspector and said that actually, rather than being concerned about it being EFB or AFB, the feeling was that they'd been foraging from wild garlic, bizarrely, which I thought was incredible. And then she says after a while the smell vanished, so it's just one of those things. So you know, there you are. So there are unusual smells. If in doubt, get your bee inspector out to come and have a
check the brood rather than the smell.
There you go. So just one last thing in terms of for Ian, the infection, the diseases there. Gary, who is out in New Zealand, has said this. He interviewed Michael Young, who recommended the book.
Oh yes, yes, there's that one as well.
So from Leslie Bailey, there you go. There's that one. So that can.
It was probably before Pam's book was published.
Yeah, it's been around quite some time.
It has. I mean, it's a very good book. I'm not knocking it in the slightest, but Pam's book has got the more recent information in.
Yeah, it only came out, I think, end of last year, didn't it, or something like that. So, so basically, there's two books for you, and I hope that helps. Now, the magazine, BeeCraft, obviously, as I said, it's available in the physical sense, and again, that's also for around the world. We can do around the world supplies, but also here in the UK and Europe. So, again, if you're watching online, you can actually subscribe to the magazine actually above you in the video. And what can we expect in next month's magazine? I think Claire and Margaret, you've been busy getting all that sorted. Is there anything of note in there that you can mention or remember?
Well, we've got the second part of the discussion about what goes into honey. So last month we talked about how nectar, how plants produce nectar. And now the second part is talking about how nectar is turned into honey. The beginners article, we're talking about the legal side of selling honey. We've got an article on making lotion bars, which are sort of solid hand creams, if you like. Obviously only for your personal use, because there's so many wretched regulations regarding stuff if you want to sell it, but you can certainly make it for yourself. And if anybody's going to Malaga, you can have a look at the bee museum that's there.
There you go. So that's the summary of the magazine for next month. So
plus other things.
Plus other things. So if you fancy subscribing and have a look at that, like I said, you can look at it anywhere you want, anyhow. So it's hopefully worldwide appeal. And I think on that note, what we'll probably look at is, because this has been a brood diseases sort of in particular, what we will try and do for the next one is look at possibly, we obviously got the Varroas, you've got various other nosemas and things like that, which we can talk through and hopefully discuss along with other things as well. So in short, I hope that's been of use. Certainly, thank you for all your questions coming in. I hope that was sufficient for you guys and that you enjoyed it all. And that's our third BeeCraft Hangout finished, and we hope you'll see us at the fourth, which I think will be exactly a month from now. We'll confirm the dates and let you all know. And if you're on Google+, keep on commenting on the Google+ event page. We'll be happy. We'll be there for a while to answer any questions. If not, we hope you enjoyed it. So thanks to the panel. Really appreciate you being here as always. Stay on while I finish the broadcast, and we can have a chat afterwards. But to everyone else, thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it. Thank you.